When someone is sabotaged or screwed over, it generally means that they were ruined or something of theirs was altered for their detriment, like somebody was framing them. So I'm going to tell you something simply. We're not going to have a crazy long intro. Today's just going to be straight to the point. This is going to be a video on the most sabotaged or screwed over driver in the history of NASCAR because, in my opinion, this guy had a potential to be way better than he was. He showed that he could be up there with the front runners in one of the most competitive eras of the sport, and he straight up got ruined, not once, but multiple times. Let's get right into it. This is the most sabotaged driver in the history of NASCAR. Jeremy Mayfield came from Owensboro, Kentucky, a town that had a lot of notable drivers that raced in motorsports. The two Walter brothers, Darrell, three-time Cup Series champion, and his brother Michael, who won two Daytona 500s. You had the three Green brothers, David and Jeff, who each won Busch Series championships in 1994 and 2000, respectively, and their brother Mark, who was a longtime competitor in NASCAR as well. They also had GZ Spencer, who was an owner driver who competed in over 400 Cup races from the early 50s all the way into the 70s. And you also had Nicky Hayden, the Kentucky Kid, who won the MotoGP World Championship in 2006. Born May 27, 1969, Jeremy Mayfield began racing in his hometown racing BMX bikes as a kid, and soon after becoming an adult, he went to work for the Sadler brothers as a fabricator and became their driver by winning Late Model Rookie of the Year at the Kentucky Motor Speedway, the old one, not the Kentucky Speedway we know now, winning the Rookie of the Year award in 1987. After competing in short tracks for a few years, Mayfield would move to the ARCA series in 1993 full-time, where he was able to get a win and finish fourth in the standings. Late in the 93 season, he would go on to also attempt to make four Cup Series starts for the Sadler brothers, where he made his debut in the Fall Charlotte race, finishing in 29th. Mayfield would try to drive the majority of the beginning of the season for the Sadler brothers come 1994, but after having only a best finish of 27th and 3 DNQs in the first 9 races, he would move to Taylor Racing, where he would make 4 of the next 6 races, never finishing higher than 21st, before landing a ride with Cale Yarborough for the remainder of the 94 season, where he was able to notch 3 top 20s and 3 DNQs, unfortunately, and at the end of the 94 season, he made 20 of the 31 races en route to finishing 37th in the standings and was running at the finish in 15 of those 20 races. Mayfield's results were enough to warrant him a full-time gig for the 1995 season driving Cale Yarborough's 98 car. Early on in the season, he missed 3 of the first 10 races, but was able to continue to qualify for the remainder of the season, only missing 1 race the rest of the year. He scored 1 top 10 and 8th place finish at Pocono, which is a track we must keep our eye on for the coming years, and he would go on to finish 31st in the standings. The following year, he started getting his first top 5s at Atlanta and Martinsville before starting to be involved in crashes in the midpoint of the season. After crashing at Darlington, this is when his career would start to change. In the Southern 500, Mayfield would fail to finish and finish 37th, while John Andretti would finish 5th, driving for Michael Kranefuss. But after that race, there would be a driver swap. Cale Yarborough would take John Andretti to drive his 98 car for the remainder of the season, while Michael Kranefuss would opt to take Jeremy Mayfield to drive his number 37 car, his 37 Ford, for the remainder of 1996. Mayfield failed to finish 4 of the remaining 8 races and DNQ'd the season finale at Atlanta, where he finished 26th in the final standings, missing only 1 race with 2 top 5s, and those were his only top 10s. He did manage to get his first career pole at Talladega that season. He also had an average finish of 24.5, but now with Michael Kranefuss, this was a significant upgrade in equipment. In 1997, Jeremy Mayfield would have a breakout season driving for Michael Kranefuss, scoring multiple top 10s and top 5s in the first 13 races, which had included back-to-back top 5s at Dover and Pocono.
Jeremy, you guys were contenders, it seemed, all day long.
Yeah, you guys did a super good job again today, and kept that Kmart RC Cold Ford up front, and just can't say enough for them. The team's working great. We're coming together. We showed this last probably 2 months. We just haven't pulled it all together in the last couple of weeks. Show what this team's made of.
All right, great run. Let's go back upstairs.
And he actually got top 10s in both the Pocono races that year. But after finishing 5th in the Brickyard 400, he would have a struggling time for the remainder of the season, only scoring one more top 10, falling to 13th in the final standings. Even though he scored 3 top 5s and 8 top 10s and only led 3 laps, he had an average finish of 17.9, and this would lead him to get a call from one of the biggest owners in the Cup Series. Following 1997, owner Roger Penske would approach Michael Kranefuss in an attempt to try to establish a partnership with him, and Kranefuss obliged, merging their cars, and now the renumbered 12 car would have full-time sponsorship by Mobil 1 and would be run under the name Penske Kranefuss Racing. But they would still be considered as a teammate to Roger Penske's main car, the number 2 run by 1989 Cup Series champion Rusty Wallace, who was still competing for wins in top 5s and top 10 points positions, or maybe even higher in his older age. Retaining Jeremy Mayfield as a driver would basically tell everybody that this was Jeremy Mayfield's main chance to show everyone what he was made of now that he was driving in top-tier equipment. And in 1998, this is exactly what happened, as Mayfield would go on to get 4 top 5s in the first 5 races and would continue to remain strong, finishing 13th or higher in the next 4 races, and after finishing second at California, would take the points lead for the first time in his career. And after finishing 19th in the Coke 600, he would go on to fall out of the points lead, but would regain it after getting 4 straight top 5s the following 4 races. He finished 5th at Dover, 6th at Richmond, 5th at Michigan, and when they came to Pocono, one of his best tracks, he would go on to have the race of his life and would find himself standing on top of the podium by scoring his first career win.
He'll clean through the turn 1 there as you see him go down the back straightaway for the last time. Gordon about 2 car lengths back. Dale Jarrett about 2 car lengths behind the 24 of Jeff Gordon.
The fans just eating it up. The tunnel turn for the last time. To go.
You can see how hard Gordon's trying there. He slid the car off the tunnel turn trying to catch Mayfield.
It has taken him 125 times, and we've got a new first-time winner in NASCAR Winston Cup Racing. Jeremy Mayfield wins at Pocono.
Once Jeremy Mayfield won the 1998 Pocono 500, he was sitting atop the NASCAR points standings, while teammate Rusty Wallace had yet to score a win and was running 6th in the points. Was Jeremy Mayfield the future of Roger Penske's NASCAR team? But unfortunately, after his win, he would fail to score top 10 for the next 5 races, including 2 DNFs at New Hampshire and Indianapolis, where he quickly plummeted from leading the points to just outside the top 5. He would rebound with 2 more top 10s, but then would have sour luck for the remainder of the season, as he scored 4 top 5s for the rest of the season, which was a grand total of 11 races, but in the remaining races, outside of a 15th place finish in the season finale at Atlanta, he finished 20th or worse in the remaining 10 races outside of Atlanta, of course. His free fall from grace prompted him to fall to 7th in the standings and unfortunately did not finish as the lead Penske car, as Rusty Wallace did manage to score a win late in the season at Phoenix to finish 4th in the standings. Jeremy Mayfield's career year 1998 ended with 1 win, 12 top 5s, 16 top 10s, a pole, 471 laps led, and he finished 7th in points with an average finish of 14.2. After such a successful season, it looked like it could only be nothing but up for Jeremy Mayfield for the 1999 season. And in the beginning, it looked like it could start up that way, scoring 3 top fives in the first 6 races, but inconsistency started to strike again, unlike the previous year in the early portion. And Mayfield struggled to hit the top 10 in points for most of the season. And after Pocono finishing ninth, trying to defend his win there, he finished 7th at Sonoma before having a 5-race streak of finishing 25th or worse. This was broken by finishing 18th at Michigan, where he followed by crashing out at Bristol. He would finish third in the Southern 500, but then would struggle at the end of the season, just like he did the previous year, only scoring 3 top 10s in the remaining races following the Southern 500, while finishing 13th or worse in the other events that weren't those top 5s. It was an off year for Jeremy Mayfield as he fell to having only 5 top 5s and 12 top 10s with no wins in 1999 and only led 221 laps. His average finish fell to 18.9 and he finished 11th in points. While you could say it was an off year for both him and his teammate Rusty Wallace, who finished 8th in points with a win at Bristol. But by mid 1999, it was common knowledge that these two cars were entirely separate teams, basically. Even though they were technically both run under Roger Penske's supervision, Jeremy Mayfield's 12 team was still run under the name Penske Kranefuss Racing. They still had the Michael Kranefuss partnership there. So the two cars weren't really worked on in the same shop and necessarily had the same crew. So the two cars were basically two separate teams, which would basically show everyone, and eventually in the future would come out, that Rusty Wallace and Jeremy Mayfield butted heads on multiple occasions, and Rusty did not like running with his teammate a lot. And entering the 2000 season, this was going to be something that needed to be addressed, and it looked like it could turn into a boiling point between these two drivers and potentially team owner Roger Penske. Jeremy Mayfield would begin the 2000 season similar to the previous year, where he had a top 10 early on at Rockingham, and after a few subpar runs, he racked up a 4th place finish at Bristol, a 6th place finish at Texas, and a 7th place finish at Martinsville. And after that 3 top 10 streak, he was sitting comfortably 9th in the standings. But this is where things took an extremely interesting turn. At Talladega, Jeremy Mayfield would go on to get the pole for the race, but the car that he used to win the pole had infractions and penalties that did not comply with NASCAR rules. And even though he came home with a 14th place finish, NASCAR penalized them so much that they came out with minus 25 points on the day, dipping him from 9th to 16th in the standings. Then you go to California, where after starting 24th, Jeremy Mayfield went on to lead 26 laps en route to getting his second career win. This looked to be a good sign, as even though it only moved him up to 14th in the standings, this is where things still got a little heated between him and the Penske camp. As when he went into victory lane, officials determined that the roof of his car was lower than the 51-inch minimum. Mayfield's excuse was, "I jumped on top of the car in victory lane like everyone else does. I guess I knocked in the roof a little." NASCAR upheld Mayfield's second win at California, but fined the Penske Kranefuss team $25,000. But this is where the inconsistency started to strike. The disparity in him and teammate Rusty Wallace's cars was vastly known, as Wallace was already winning multiple times and now challenging for a good position in points, while Mayfield was having a huge subpar day. At Richmond, he finished 36th, followed by a 6th place run in the Coca-Cola 600. He failed to finish the next 2 races at Dover and Michigan due to engine problems. And then when we go to Pocono, again, arguably his best track, he has another great day where he leads only 9 laps, but the most notable came on the last one because Dale Earnhardt was leading And Jeremy Mayfield decided to knock him out of the way to get his third career win and his second win in the Pocono 500 in the last 3 years. People in the crowds mixed with cheers and boos as Mayfield motored across the finish line, and Mayfield's excuse to taking the win was, I quote, "I wanted to rattle his cage a little," a saying he took from Earnhardt that Earnhardt said after dumping Terry Labonte to the win at Bristol last August. Following that win at Pocono, he remained 16th in the standings, and his inconsistency woes wouldn't stop there, as he would finish 33rd at Sonoma. He would crash and finish last. He would fail to finish and finish last at Daytona, and he followed up with 2 top 10s at New Hampshire and at Pocono, where he almost swept Pocono in 2000 after he was leading toward the end of the race, but suffered a flat tire, allowing Rusty Wallace to take home his second win of 2000. But in the Brickyard 400, it would all go down for Jeremy Mayfield, as he would go on to have a concussion after crashing during practice, and he was replaced for the next 2 races. And things only got worse when he came back. Finishing 13th at Michigan was the only high point, but the disparity in the 2 and the 12 at Penske was so astronomical that this was getting heated between Mayfield and Roger Penske, as not only would Mayfield fail to finish 1 race, not 2 races, he would fail to finish 7 of the next 8 races. He would crash at Bristol. He would crash after winning the pole in the Southern 500 at Darlington. He would have an engine failure at Richmond, crash out at New Hampshire, another engine issue at Dover after, guess what, winning the pole there. He would have overheating issues at Martinsville, and then followed it up with a random second place finish at the Fall Charlotte race, and would have failed to finish at Talladega, finishing in 42nd. He would go on for the final 4 races to have 2 second place runs at Phoenix and Homestead, and his 2 other races, he got the pole at Rockingham but finished 29th, and then failed to finish the final race at Atlanta due to, guess what, another engine failure, finishing 41st. While teammate Rusty Wallace was able to finish 7th in points on the strength of 4 wins, his first multi-win season since 1995, his teammate Jeremy Mayfield was either running up front or dealing with problems with the car, something that Rusty didn't really have many issues with. As in that 6-race streak of Mayfield failing to finish a race, 3 of them had to do with car issues, and 2 of those were engine issues. In fact, Jeremy Mayfield had failed to finish 6 races due to engine failures, and overall had a grand total of 11 DNFs on the year, which prompted Mayfield to finish, even though he had 2 wins, he had 6 top 5s, an improvement over 1999, 12 top 10s, matching 1999. He had 4 poles, led a career high 850 laps, but finished 24th in the final standings with an average finish of 22nd. And he only was running at the finish in 21 of the 32 races he completed in. And remember, he missed 2 races because of that concussion he suffered at Indianapolis, and he only finished 15 of those races on the lead lap. This was an immensely bad season. And after 2000, Michael Kranefuss would break the partnership with Roger Penske, but Roger would keep the 12 team in his stable, now the team running under the moniker Penske Racing South. But the 2 and 12 teams were still operating under separate shops, and they were essentially 2 different teams. So now 2000 was basically a showing that he needed to improve. Although the 2 and 12 teams were under the same moniker, the same team, they were essentially 2 different entities. And Jeremy Mayfield needed to try to push his underperforming 12 car farther ahead than his teammate to show that he could keep this ride. But it seemingly came out that Roger Penske wasn't favoring Jeremy Mayfield on his team and was giving Rusty better cars, and Mayfield was getting sort of the second-hand stuff. As early on in the season, Mayfield again began the year with a 9th place finish in the Daytona 500, and then followed it up with a 38th place run at Rockingham, 2 crashes at Las Vegas and Atlanta. Well, not exactly crashes, that he just failed to finish those 2 races. One was for a crash, the other one was for handling issues. Then he followed it up by finishing 3rd place at Darlington and 3rd place at Bristol. And following that Bristol race, he was sitting 22nd in points. And then afterward, it seemingly felt like Mayfield was either going to have a really good day or a really bad day. 22nd at Texas, 30th at Martinsville, 35th at Talladega. This is all on pace, mind you. And then we go to California, where Jeremy Mayfield is trying to defend his win there from the prior year, and he has a good day, finishing inside the top 5. But the problem is, teammate Rusty Wallace went on to win. And it only just got worse. 36th at Richmond, he got a top 10 at the Coke 600 and a 4th place run at Phoenix. But every other race all the way up to New Hampshire, he finished 17th or worse. And outside of that 17th place run in that Pepsi 400, he finished 32nd or worse. Even at Pocono, his best track, he finished a dismal 36th after trying to defend his win there from the prior year. And it was just getting worse toward the end of the season. He got another top 5 at Watkins Glen, finishing 3rd. But Jeremy Mayfield, unfortunately, was now the excuse for Roger Penske. Roger Penske had now found the excuse to dump Jeremy Mayfield from his team, as after another mediocre 36th place run at Kansas, Jeremy Mayfield was kicked to the curb after race 28 of 36 of the 2001 season. Jeremy Mayfield's 2001 season ended prematurely because of having unreliable equipment. It seemingly felt like he was running high up front in the races he ran well, and then in the other races he was struggling to even finish in the top 30. He ended 2001 with, in 28 races, 0 wins, 5 top 5s, 7 top 10s, 60 laps led. He finished 35th in points with an average finish of 23.6 and only finished on a lead lap in 12 of those 28 races. And now that Jeremy Mayfield and Roger Penske had burned their bridges down, namely because Roger Penske was favoring Jeremy Mayfield and he screwed him out. Rusty Wallace got a win at California and finished 7th in points once again, while Mayfield's tenure at Roger Penske ended prematurely because of his disfavor he had with Roger Penske. And after 2001, he sat on the sidelines just waiting for a new ride. Mayfield was happy. He wanted out of Roger Penske, seeing his treatment there. And Rusty Wallace, again, he was not in agreement with Mayfield, and they butted heads several times. Eventually, Wallace and Mayfield would come to agreement and reconcile with each other in the future. But at the end of 2001, Jeremy Mayfield's career was in a bit of weird limbo. He had 3 career cup wins and led the point standings in the middle of 1998 before being hounded by sour luck. And now he was known for not being in the greatest favor with Roger Penske for whatever reason, and he was sitting on the sidelines. But entering 2002, a new team came up to him, and he decided to sign with them, seeing that the Daytona 500 was coming up, and he still had no ride secured. This was Evernham Motorsports, a 2-car team that was technically that was going to be a technical 3-car team for the 2002 season. Following 2001, Bill Elliott was their lead driver in their 9-car. Casey Atwood was a rookie in their 19 Dodge. And in 2002, the team wanted to move Atwood to Ultra Motorsports so they could form an alliance with their 7-car, leaving the 19 wide open. And wanting someone with experience, the team hired Jeremy Mayfield for the 2002 season. And this team, remember, this was supposed to be the flagship Dodge team. This is the second year of Dodge's return to NASCAR. So now Mayfield had to compete with Bill Elliott, who, just like Rusty Wallace, is a former Cup champion. that was well past the prime of his career, but still performing really well, as Elliott had gotten a win at Homestead in 2001 to break a 7-year-long winless streak and finish 15th in points. So now, let's see what Mayfield could do in this Dodge after previously running a Ford for his entire career. What could he do with Evernham in 2002? Unfortunately, it seemed like the exact same thing at Roger Penske's team. Even though Mayfield and Evernham got off well, the 9 and the 19 were definitely different entities, as in the first 8 races, Mayfield only had one top 10, which was a strong second place run at Las Vegas. But every other race, he had finished 11th or worse. Luckily, he did have 4 top 20s in a row from races 5 to 8, so there was a bit of upside. But unreliability came into the plague the 19 team after failing to finish Talladega, California, and he followed it up with a strong 5th place run at Richmond. But afterward, he failed to finish 2 of the next 3 races, and all the way until the Pepsi 400, he was finishing races 28th or worse. So it was looking pretty mediocre for this 19 team, while teammate Bill Elliott was having a strong run, as he was battling for a top 10 points position. Eventually, Mayfield will get a top 20 again come in the Pepsi 400 at Daytona, finishing 13th, before finishing 34th at Chicagoland, and it was basically known by this mid-season point that the 19 team was pretty mediocre, and it was pretty sad to see, because then afterward at Pocono and Indianapolis, Evernham Motorsports would go to victory lane twice in a row with Bill Elliott. He would win at Pocono in a rain-shortened race and would win the Brickyard 400, and in both races, Mayfield failed to finish. Mayfield would limp the end of the season out, scoring 2 more top 10s at Richmond and Kansas, but followed it up with a 6-race streak to end the season, finishing 21st or worse, to finish 26th in the final standings, with a grand total of 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. He only led 30 laps on the season, finished 26th in points with an average finish of 24.1, which was worse than his previous year with Roger Penske. Of course, you could say that this was definitely a downgrade in equipment compared to the Penske Racing organization, but still, with Bill Elliott getting 2 wins and finishing 13th in points, this wasn't the greatest thing necessarily.
Dodge Racing. It's overpowering.
Wow. That I just watched that. All right, we definitely need to improve in 2003. In 2003, it looked like Jeremy Mayfield's career was about to go off the deep end, as after getting a top 10, finishing 8th in the Daytona 500, he did not get a top 20 again until Talladega, where he got the pole, by the way. I don't know why. That's like his 3rd pole he's gotten at the track, so he's pretty good at qualifying there. But it got worse. 3 DNFs across the next 4 races, and by the time Michigan ended, where he finished 13th, that 19 car was sitting comfortably 29th in the standings, while Bill Elliott was still competing for top 15s week in and week out. And it looked like there was nothing that Jeremy Mayfield could do to turn this season around. But he did. Jeremy Mayfield found his stride. He had a 3-race top 10 streak from Sonoma to Chicagoland, and although he had a little bit of an inconsistent stretch right after, he followed it up by getting another 3-race top 10 streak, which included a fabulous second-place run at Richmond. He finished at 11th in New Hampshire, and then he finished runner-up again at Dover, and then 3rd place at Kansas just a few races later. This crazy late-season turnaround saw him challenge for multiple top 10s, including leading 37 laps at Kansas and 96 at Rockingham, where he finished in 3rd. And he ended the season with a 6th place run at Homestead, bringing him all the way up to 19th in the final standings with 0 wins, 4 top 5s, 12 top 10s, a pole, 156 laps led, and an average finish of 20.6. Now, this is where Jeremy Mayfield's career takes a really interesting turn in the 2004 season. As we know now, 2004 was the first season in which NASCAR had instituted the chase because Matt Kenseth was simply so overpowered the previous season that they wanted more people to battle for championships. Hence, bringing the 10 race chase in 2004, where after the 26th race at Richmond, the top 10 in the championship basically will battle it out with a smaller point gap over the final 10 races. And now, after 2003, the flagship driver for Evernham, Bill Elliott, had announced his full-time retirement at the end of the season, but he had an extreme uptick in performance that saw him get his final win at Rockingham and nearly win at Homestead before running out of gas on the last lap. He finished ninth in points, but now that he was retiring and reducing his schedule drastically to only drive the research and development car for Evernham in 3 races, this meant Jeremy Mayfield was going to be the flagship driver at a multi-car operation for the first time in his career. And Ray Evernham's had an eye on a tantalizing NASCAR Busch Series prospect to replace Bill Elliott in the 9, Kasey Kahne, who had no prior Cup Series experience. And this was going to be interesting to see whether Kahne would take over from Mayfield's shadow in the veteran category, I guess, because Mayfield had been here for quite a while and Kahne was going to be a rookie. So this was going to be interesting to see how the 9 and 19 teams would adapt with each other. Early on in 2004 and throughout the season, Kasey Kahne would light the NASCAR world on fire, finishing second in his second ever race at Rockingham in a photo finish to Matt Kenseth, and then losing to Kenseth the following race at Rockingham. And then eventually he finished second to Elliott Sadler at Texas and continued to rack up top 5s all throughout the regular season, and it looked like Kahne was going to be a shoo-in to make the inaugural chase for the Nextel Cup. But he had some inconsistency in the summer months that led to him dipping in the points. But what people didn't notice was how consistent Jeremy Mayfield had been, scoring many top 20s, and although not as many top 10s as his teammate, he had a best finish of second at Atlanta early on in the season and a second place at Pocono to Jimmy Johnson, where he finished second under caution right behind the 48 car. And through the summer months, Mayfield capitalized, scoring 4 top 10s in a 5-race span, which was 11th was the place that he did not get a top 10 to make that a 5-race streak. And after finishing 16th at California, he was sitting 16th in points entering the chase cutoff at Richmond, while teammate Kasey Kahne was sitting in 9th. Entering the race at Richmond, there were many people vying for the remaining spots in the chase. Only the top 7 had basically locked themselves in on points, and 8th, 9th, and 10th were still wide open. Ryan Newman held the 8th spot, Kahne held the 9th, and Mark Martin held the 10th. And Jeremy Mayfield was sitting all the way down in 14th, but the competition was so close to each other that the top 15 in points all had a chance at vying for getting a chase spot. And throughout the day, Jeremy Mayfield, all he needed to do was have everything go his way, and he needed to have a perfect day. And that's exactly what happened. There are many videos talking about how good Jeremy Mayfield was at Richmond in 2004. But I'm not going to get into it completely because there's so many other videos talking about that. But Jeremy Mayfield had everything go his way, leading 151 laps, and eventually toward the end of the race, it looked like he could possibly battle for the win, but on the long run, he seemed to prove not as fast as Kurt Busch, who continued to be the main contender toward the end of the race as he kept finding his way right up front. But under 10 laps to go, Kurt Busch would run out of gas, and Mayfield had saved just enough to make it to the finish, and he needed everything to go his way. Luckily, his main competitor in battling for a chase spot, Jamie McMurray, who had scored so many top 10s through the regular season, was struggling with battery issues, I'm pretty sure, and couldn't move up the field and did not make up enough points to catch up to the 19 car. Jeremy Mayfield would lead the last 8 laps en route to getting his 4th career win and his first win since Pocono in 2000, and was able to lock himself into the chase by getting this victory, his 10th top 10 of the regular season. All the while, Kasey Kahne had a mediocre day and finished 24th, which included getting spun out in the mid portion of the race, and he got knocked out of the chase as he was 12th in the standings after that race. And that was so interesting because even though Kahne had set the world on fire and he had a lot of unlucky moments, such as that when he could have won at Dover and when he could have won at Charlotte, he still failed to make the chase despite his stellar season. And now, interestingly, his more consistent teammate that was out of the limelight, Jeremy Mayfield, had just won his way into the inaugural chase for the Cup. This is probably one of the most competitive eras of NASCAR in history, and Jeremy Mayfield was making the select group of guys that were battling for the championship at the end of the season. The inaugural chase included Kurt Busch, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Mark Martin, Dale Jr., Tony Stewart, Ryan Newman, Matt Kenseth, and Elliott Sadler, along with Mayfield himself. This is a pretty elite group of drivers. Unfortunately, early on in the chase, Jeremy Mayfield's title hopes got dumped after he was collected in a wreck with Robbie Gordon and Greg Biffle, and this ultimately basically ended his championship hopes as his consistency for the remainder of the chase lacked tremendously, only scoring 3 top 10s in the entire chase, but finishing 19th or worse in the remaining events, and he never was higher than 10th in points at any given point during the chase, leading him to finish 10th overall in points with 1 win, 5 top 5s, 13 top 10s, 2 poles, 387 laps led, an average finish of 16.9, and he finished on the lead lap in 21 of the 36 races. And again, he finished 10th in points. And this is something insane to look at because remember, 5 top 5s and 13 top 10s. His teammate Kasey Kahne, that won Rookie of the Year, finished 13th in the standings with 13 top 5s and 14 top 10s. And yet, Mayfield's consistency allowed him to finish higher in the standings, therefore asserting himself as the lead driver. The 2005 season for Evernham Motorsports would be an interesting one. Kasey Kahne would take the role of inconsistent driver after having multiple runs that were just not good with each other before randomly getting his first win at Richmond, ironically at the same track where Mayfield had just won last September. But he was a non-factor for the chase due to his inconsistency. How was his teammate doing? Well, after the first 2 races, Mayfield went on a 6-race top 20 streak before finishing 4th at Talladega. He would go on to have his first and only DNF of the season at Darlington, where he would finish 33rd, and would go on to have multiple top 20s for the main portion of the season. He had barely any top 10s, though, which was his main thing for the summertime, as finishing 4th at the Coke 600 would be his only other top 5 before the summer stretch, where a lot of drivers were inconsistent in 2005, allowing Mayfield to remain inside the top 10 in points for majority of the season. And then after Michigan, where he finished in 22nd, the first race, they didn't really have much speed at that track. Before they went on a streak, 7th at Sonoma, 12th at Daytona, 6th at Chicagoland, 19th at New Hampshire, 18th at Pocono, 4th at the Brickyard, 11th at Watkins Glen. And then when they went back to Michigan, Jeremy Mayfield had basically a 20th place car all day, but many tests on fuel strategy earlier before helped Mayfield in the long run, as late in the race fuel mileage came into play, and Jeremy Mayfield was able to stretch his fuel all the way to the end to hold off Scott Riggs to win his 5th career Cup Series race at Michigan, which would eventually put him as high as 6th in the standings, and he would make the chase with ease as the 7th seed following a 6th place finish at Richmond. In the chase, Mayfield ran strong in the beginning, scoring 5 straight top 20s to open up the first 5 races of the chase, which included a 7th place run at Dover. Following those first 5 races, Mayfield sat as high as 7th in points in the chase before, unfortunately, he had a free fall, as he would only go on to have a best finish of 24th in the next 4 races before finishing 10th at the season finale at Homestead to end the season 9th in the final standings. Now, it is important to note the only reason why Jeremy Mayfield did not finish last in the 2005 chase was because Roush had just benched Kurt Busch for the final 2 races of the season, because he was caught driving drunk in Arizona. So Mayfield didn't pass him in points until his top 10 finish at Homestead. Jeremy Mayfield would end his 2005 season with 1 win, 4 top 5s, 9 top 10s, 151 laps led, and an average finish of 15.9, which is a position increase over 2004, and he finished on the lead lap in 25 of the 36 races, a career best in that regard. While teammate Kasey Kahne, on the other hand, even though he had similar stats, he had 1 win, 5 top 5s, 8 top 10s, but he finished 23rd in the final standings and was a non-factor when it came to chase conversations. He had an average finish of 21.9 and only finished on the lead lap in 18 races. Seeing the disparity in his two cars, Ray Evernham decided to do what we all know now as a DEI 2005 move, which, if you guys know what I'm talking about, you'll know that this did not go at all what it was meant to be for DEI in the 2005 season, as they were horrendous that year. But Ray Evernham thought that this would be a good thing to do, and that was just a bad roll of the dice for DEI, that it was going to work for his own team. And now with two drivers, Kasey Kahne being an inconsistent superstar, and he had a consistent veteran in Jeremy Mayfield, which person was this going to benefit? Mayfield was coming off 2 chase appearances in probably the most competitive era in the series, and Kasey Kahne had yet to really prove himself as a threat for a championship. So entering the 2006 season, Evernham was at a bit of a crossroads when it came to the team owner. Jeremy Mayfield was coming off 2 chase appearances and 2 wins with consistency, and unfortunately didn't have the end to a season that most team owners would want, and he struggled to finish high in the chase standings. While Kasey Kahne had showed immense promise as a rookie in 2004, but struggled with severe inconsistency and struggling with his crew in 2005 despite scoring his first win. So here's how the Evernham stable looked ahead of 2006. You had the 9 car of Kasey Kahne, you had the 19 car of Jeremy Mayfield, and you had the part-time research and development car of the 91, usually driven by Bill Elliott in select races. So what happened? Well, the 10 car would come into existence with Scott Riggs replacing the 91 car, as the 91 would be shut down in order to make Evernham a 3-car full-time effort. Now, remember how I was talking about DEI 2005 move? If you don't know what that is, basically DEI, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, initiated an entire team swap between their 2 full-time drivers of Dale Jr. and Michael Waltrip. They swapped both their pit crews around in an attempt to try to make both drivers better. So, here's what happened. Jeremy Mayfield's pit crew, an experienced crew that had led him to 2 wins and 2 chase appearances, was moved to Kasey Kahne's team. They moved to the 9 team in an effort to try to make him better. So, if this was a complete DEI 2005 move, then Kahne's pit crew would have gone to Mayfield, right? That's not what happened. Kasey Kahne's pit crew was assigned to the new 10 car for Scott Riggs in his first season there. So what happened to Jeremy Mayfield? Well, Jeremy Mayfield got stuck with the part-time research and development pit crew from the old 91 car. So Jeremy Mayfield's pit crew, his entire team was going downgrade completely. He was losing his experienced pit crew and now was getting put with a part-time ragtag research and development pit crew. No offense to any of those pit crew, that I know they know how to do their jobs, but they're definitely not as good as Mayfield's previous crew. What was going on at Evernham Motorsports outside of the Cup Series? They had run a few Busch Series races previously, but in 2006, they had no plans to. In fact, they went for something different. They had a development driver, Erin Crocker, in 2005, and after having some decent success there, she didn't have a win, she had some decent success. She was promoted to the Truck Series full-time with sponsorship from General Mills for the 2006 Truck Series season. So now they had another full-time effort to focus on, and heading into the 2006 season, let's see what would happen with this new team swap, a new Truck Series driver in place. Everything was different going into 2006 for Evernham Motorsports. And I'm going to say this right off the bat. If you look on one side of the team swap thing, It looked amazing for one of the drivers. Kasey Kahne would break out. He would go on to have 4 wins in the regular season and was a complete dark horse for the championship fight before having a horrible stretch in the summer months that needed him to be perfect come chase time. He would go on to score win number 5 at California and finish 3rd at Richmond just to get into the chase, and he scored another win, his 6th of the season at Charlotte, en route to finishing 8th in points. This was an amazing move by the team swap after he had just gotten Jeremy Mayfield's former crew that led him to 2 chases. How about Scott Riggs? Scott Riggs with Kasey Kahne's former pit crew, even though he missed the season opening Daytona 500, he was able to get 8 top 10s and finish 20th in points along with an unofficial win in the All-Star Open. A race that Jeremy Mayfield had actually won twice before, back in 1998 and 2002. And how is Jeremy Mayfield doing? Oh, something happened. Something bad happened. I don't know what's going on. Jeremy Mayfield had a 1 top 20 through the first 8 races and never scored a top 10 through the first quarter. 36th at Daytona, 22nd at California, 25th at Las Vegas, 41st at Atlanta, 16th at Bristol. It was just going downhill. And eventually, as the season went on, the team had a best finish of 13th at Talladega heading into Dover. But toward the midseason, Jeremy Mayfield was getting extremely agitated because he knew that he could perform way better than this. Just look at the previous 2 or even 3, 2.5 seasons to see how he had been performing, and Jeremy Mayfield was not happy. Jeremy Mayfield had every right to be upset. After being the team's lead driver for the last 2 seasons that resulted in 2 chase appearances, he alleged that the team swap between him and him receiving the former research and development pit crew attributed to his downfall, as he struggled to even make it toward the midpoint of the season without having any top 10s. He had a best finish of 13th at Talladega through the first 13 races and only had 4 top 20s in that span. That team was just running mediocre as heck all season, while Scott Riggs was running decent enough to score top 10s and Kasey Kahne was out winning multiple races. But it got worse for Jeremy Mayfield because not only did he allege that the team swap got bad, he also blamed his own team owner. Jeremy Mayfield was saying toward the summer months that Ray Evernham was spending an unusual amount of time with Erin Crocker.
I just signed a contract extension with Evernham Motorsports, and at that time, Ray had hired a developmental driver, a female developmental driver, because he was part of the diversity program with NASCAR. The whole team noticed that Ray was spending a lot of time with our developmental driver. Everybody knew that it was more than just a driver development program. You know what I mean? You might as well come clean here, because he had a wife and kid. You know, and it's going to get back, and they try to get it out of me, and that's how it all happened. The media was just getting closer and closer and closer to figuring it out. They were asking us about it, and I said, I don't know, I don't know, I don't want to get in the middle of it, I don't know, for like 2 months. So I just said, I don't have to talk to Ray. Next morning, I get up, and it's on the front page of the Chicago paper. It says Mayfield says Evernham's an absentee car owner. And I knew right then that would be the last time I ever sat in a 19 car. I could have just played the game. And I look back, this is my fault. My fault.
Of course, we all know what happened. Jeremy Mayfield basically spilled the beans between Ray Evernham's affair with Erin Crocker. That ended horribly. And the proof is basically there. Jeremy Mayfield was coming off 2 chase appearances with 2 wins, and by the time the Brickyard 400 had ended, that team was sitting 34th in the standings with no chance to make the chase. But Ray Evernham was having none of it, and Jeremy Mayfield was immediately fired following the Brickyard 400. So there we go. Jeremy Mayfield had been screwed yet again, not only by a team swap that allowed him to get a part-time pit crew that was not used to competing in a full schedule, he had to deal with now his team owner not even paying attention to him or his teammates, and when he talked about it and explained what the deal was, he got kicked to the curb straight to it. And for some reason, nobody hired Jeremy Mayfield for most of the remainder of the 2006 season. he was able to land a 2-shot deal with Phoenix Racing to drive their '09 car for the last 2 races of the year, where at Phoenix he failed to qualify, and at Homestead he parked the car in 42nd. Jeremy Mayfield was coming off 2 chase appearances, and in 2006, in 22 races, had zeros across the board, led 15 laps, finished 39th in points with an average finish of 28.6, and had 9 lead lap finishes, and of course his DNQ at Phoenix. I don't know why, but for some reason this firing from Evernham seemed to haunt him heading into 2007, because if it was me, I would take a chance at this guy. He had scored multiple wins the previous few years and made the chase for the cup. But in 2007, nobody took a chance on Jeremy Mayfield. The only chance he was able to find was at Bill Davis Racing in their second car, and it's the first year of Toyota, which was bound to not be great. Bill Davis Racing's 36 car Toyota was supposed to be a full-time effort in 2007. But if you look at the roster, it says Jeremy Mayfield was a part-time driver. Why? Because he DNQ'd more races than starts across the season and had a best finish of 23rd at Talladega and had 4 straight DNQs to start the season with a grand total of 18 DNQs driving that 36 car. Toward the end of the season, he was let go from the 36 and was signed to drive the 66 for Haas CNC Racing, replacing Jeff Green for the final 4 races of the season, where he was able to net a best finish of 22nd at Texas, and he finished 45th in points with 6 laps led and an average finish of 32.1, only finishing on the lead lap in 3 races. And heading into 2008, he was the driver that was signed full-time to replace Johnny Sauter in Haas CNC's 70 Chevy. And across the first 7 races, he struggled because why? Haas CNC is a backmarker team. He only scored 1 top 20 as 16th at Las Vegas before getting kicked to the curb after the 7th race of the season, because it was announced that Tony Stewart was able to announce his purchase into the team, and the team was done with Mayfield essentially for the rest of the year. Mayfield only got 1 more shot for the rest of 2008, coming at Dover for Chip Ganassi Racing and their struggling 40 team, where he finished 25th. He ended that year with 8 races made, and he had an average finish of 30.3. As 2009 rolled around, Jeremy Mayfield was at a crossroads in his NASCAR career. For some reason, his career had taken such a nosedive following the 2005 season and his fallout with Ray Evernham, and I don't understand why people didn't acknowledge his previous success, but nobody took a chance on him. And in the 2009 season, Mayfield announced he and his wife would field a Toyota full-time for the 2009 season as a new owner-driver, Mayfield Motorsports, in the number 41, getting the number from Chip Ganassi after Reed Sorensen left them following the previous year. This looked to be a feel-good story because now Mayfield is one of the guys that weren't locked in to make every race, and he had to try to qualify. He would make it into the Daytona 500, but would only finish in 40th, qualifying for the next race at California, finishing in 34th, before missing the next 3 races. He would qualify for Martinsville and finish 38th before DNQing again the next 2 races. Once they came to Talladega, he failed to finish due to crashing, and he led a lap in that race actually, before finishing in 32nd. Then he would make the following race at Richmond, finishing in 35th, before DNQing the following race at Darlington. But even if he was a feel-good story, for some reason it always felt like somebody was after Jeremy Mayfield. And he couldn't even make his owner-driver business go anywhere, because this was just the tip of the iceberg for Mayfield and his owner-driver team, and ultimately his NASCAR career. If you thought that his nosedive after 2005 was bad, this was worse.
Jeremy Mayfield, driver of the number 41 car in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. Tony Martin, a licensed crew member with the number 34 team in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, and Ben Williams, a licensed crew member with the number 16 team in the NASCAR Nationwide Series, have been indefinitely suspended from NASCAR for violating the sanctioning body's substance abuse policy.
On May 9th, 2009, shortly after Jeremy Mayfield failed to qualify for the Cup Series race at Darlington, it was announced that he was suspended indefinitely by NASCAR for violating NASCAR's substance abuse policy. David Black, whose company oversees NASCAR's testing program, refused to specify the substance that Mayfield apparently tested positive for, instead saying, quote, "It was a drug of concern." Mayfield denied this accusation, saying that the only reason why he possibly tested positive is because he believed that the combination of a prescribed medicine and an over-the-counter medicine reacted together and resulted in a positive drug test. He said that he and his doctor were working with both Mr. Black and NASCAR to try to resolve this strange issue. Dr. Black disputed Mayfield's claims, stating that what we have here is a clear violation of policy. In my many years of experience, I have never seen a violation like this due to the combination of over-the-counter or prescription products. And this was coming off a pretty high era where a lot of drivers were being suspended for taking drugs such as Shane Meal or Aaron Fike. But a week after his suspension, Mayfield said that he had only taken 2 tablets of Claritin D and some Adderall, which he stated was to help his ADD, and he had never used any sort of illegal drugs. He had his wife, family, friends, fans, crew chief, and other team members, drugstore receipts, and signed prescription from his care provider that backed these claims. But criticisms of NASCAR's weird drug testing policy became rampant, and several suggested that NASCAR's weird secrecy over Mayfield's results was politically motivated because they didn't want to ruin Claritin's reputation, who sponsored Carl Edwards in the Cup Series at the time. With all this weird stuff going on, Mayfield announced that J.J. Yaley would be an interim driver while Mayfield had to deal with the stuff starting at the Coke 600 and the All-Star race. And then, on June 9th, ESPN reported that at Richmond, Mayfield tested positive for methamphetamine. What? I don't know what's happening anymore. It's just so much going on. During all this, a doctor from Florida stated that it was impossible for Mayfield to use the levels of methamphetamine NASCAR claimed he did, or else he would be dead or a chronic user. Contrasting this, another medical professional in Central Florida, the combination of medication cited by Mayfield has a 15% chance of a false positive being obtained. With all this going on, this went to court, and on July 1st, 2009, U.S. District Court Judge Graham Mullen granted a temporary injunction allowing Mayfield's suspension to be lifted. The judge concluded that the likelihood of a false positive in this case is quite substantial. In granting the injunction, Mullen determined that the harm to Jeremy Mayfield significantly outweighs the harm to NASCAR. But even with this lifted suspension, Mayfield had to sit out the Coke 400 at Daytona and the Chicagoland race because he had lack of sponsorship. But again, later on, 2 weeks after that judge ruling, NASCAR stated that Mayfield had apparently tested positive again for meth during testing conducted outside of a NASCAR event. At and by raiding Jeremy Mayfield's house on July 6th, 5 days after his suspension was lifted, they completely raided his house with his wife. And he, in the entire podcast with Dale Jr. that Mayfield was on, he has an entire story about how they raided him and accused him of 28 felonies and this crazy stuff. I personally believe him that NASCAR screwed him up after this. I don't know why. This is like a Bill Belichick, Malcolm Butler Super Bowl 52 mystery, but I personally believe him. I'm not going to put any audio of the podcast in because I don't know if Dale Jr. will copyright me, so I'll put that in the description below. Mayfield continued to deny ever using meth and to account for the results by proper use of Claritin combined with prescription treatment. Additionally, which is weird, after NASCAR raided his house and made him do a drug test. 40 minutes after this, an independent lab came by and said that he tested negative, which is very interesting. Then, to make this even worse, the widow of Jeremy Mayfield's father, Lisa, which I'm assuming isn't his mother because it would say his mother, right? She said that she was his mother and had seen him use meth many times since 1998. Jeremy rejected these allegations, refuting statements, and said that she just adopted him because he married his dad, and adoption being conditioned for the claimed relationship. Apparently, Lisa Mayfield later trespassed on Jeremy's property and assaulted people that she found there and was arrested. So that was kind of weird, and she eventually withdrew all her claims concerning Jeremy. Eventually, another appeals court reversed Mayfield's suspension on July 24th, 2009, and in May 2010, Mullen threw out Mayfield's entire case, saying that he waived his right to sue NASCAR for defamation when he agreed to take part in NASCAR events. So with all that out of the way, Mayfield remained suspended from NASCAR. And apparently he could theoretically return to NASCAR if he completed the Road to Recovery program, which isn't a guarantee to get you back into NASCAR. Like Aaron Fike, after his whole debacle in 2007, eventually completed the program in 2012, but yet never competed in NASCAR following the 2007 season. But the only way to complete that program is you have to submit to a drug testing facility in a lab belonging to Dr. Black, which is the only lab accepted by NASCAR. And Mayfield said that he was willing to take a test as long as he could pee in a cup for LabCorp or some other credible lab, which is his quote in 2014. And to this day, after 2009, Jeremy Mayfield has not ever been seen racing in a NASCAR race or on an entry list, nothing. There are a couple of other things that he has that are legal issues, which include a count of possession of drug paraphernalia in 2014, but it was just weird. I don't know what happened. Why NASCAR screwed Jeremy Mayfield over. There are tons of videos on YouTube you can go looking up of a bunch of weird things that never came out about his suspension that are very interesting. I'm not going to go into them at full detail right now. Again, the Dale Jr. podcast with Jeremy Mayfield is very interesting, that he thinks he was blackballed, and you can see that in the description below. It's very interesting. And he never made a start in NASCAR again. At the age of 40, in 2009, in 5 races, he led 2 laps, had an average finish of 35.8, 6 DNQs, and only failed to finish one of those races. And he finished 54th in the standings, a regression from 50th in 2008. So Jeremy Mayfield's career was super interesting. Starting off young with Cale Yarborough's team before getting a job eventually with Roger Penske, where he had a potential championship winning season in 1998, scoring his first win and leading the points. And once he got passed by Jeff Gordon, nobody got past Jeff Gordon to win the championship for the remainder of the 98 season when Gordon scored 13 wins. But Mayfield had horrible luck and fell to 17 points. Eventually, across the next 2 seasons, it came out with this whole rift he had with Roger Penske and with his teammate Rusty Wallace to an extent, especially in the 2000 season, where Mayfield scored 2 wins but failed to finish 11 races and missed 2 due to a concussion, and he fell to 24th in the final standings and only finished 21 of the 32 races he ran, with 15 of them being on the lead lap. The following season, he was dumped because of how bad the 12 car was just performing on pace, which isn't Mayfield's fault, and he ended up going to Evernham, which was a slow, but it was worth it for his journey. After doing pretty mediocre in 2002, he got on rails toward the end of 2003, and this translated into 2004, overpowering his teammate in the end, scoring his first win in many years, and making the inaugural chase in 2004. And the following year in 2005, he got another win, his 5th at Michigan, and made the chase again, and this one he was actually more consistent, where he finished 9th in points, which was pretty good. But who would have thought that Homestead race in 2005 would be the last time Jeremy Mayfield ever sat in a top 10 in the results? After making his second chase appearance, he never finished in the top 10 ever again. In 2006, his entire career was screwed by Ray Evernham after his whole weird team swap, and he got stuck with the part-time pit crew. And then, after revealing the whole affair between Ray Evernham and Erin Crocker, basically ruined his career apparently. For some reason, this guy was coming off 2 chases and took an absolute nosedive just for saying what he saw. He was the one that wasn't afraid to speak out. Eventually getting trapped with Bill Davis and Gene Haas's NASCAR team, and by the time he wanted to become an owner-driver, he was apparently testing positive for drugs, a claim that he still refuses to this day. And personally, I believe him. Because of all the stuff Jeremy Mayfield has gone through, he was screwed 3 times. He was screwed by Roger Penske in 2000-2001, getting worse parts, less reliable, and it was clear that he and Rusty Wallace didn't really share the same views. And then getting kicked off by Evernham after Mayfield decided to just speak out on how he's doing and what his team owner is doing. And then he's getting screwed by NASCAR for whatever reason, and I don't know why. It's extremely shady that NASCAR is still refusing to reveal the results of their apparent positive test on Jeremy Mayfield. So that's really it. That's my whole analysis. This video is way longer than I intended it to be, but it's still worth it. The most sabotage driver in the history of NASCAR, Jeremy Mayfield, achieved much more than lots of other drivers, and he achieved more than what some drivers could wish for. 5 career NASCAR Cup Series wins, and he made 2 chases. I just want to put this into perspective. In 2004 and 2005, Jeremy Mayfield won 2 races and made the chase in both seasons. You compare this to Kevin Harvick. Yes, the 60-time Cup Series winner, 2014 Cup Series champion, 2-time Busch Series champion Kevin Harvick. In 2004 and 2005 combined, Kevin Harvick scored 1 win at Bristol in 2005 and failed to make the chase both seasons, finishing 14th overall in both 04 and 05. So I just want you to think about that for a moment. And then an absolute nosedive following 2005 for Jeremy Mayfield. Jeremy Mayfield was screwed 3 times, unfortunately, in his career, and in my opinion, is the most sabotage driver in the history of NASCAR. I hope you guys liked that video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.